Hello, good afternoon. My name is Mark Wilson. I'm Chief Operating Officer and Head of Product for a company called Switch Media, which is based out of Sydney, Australia. We do end-to-end OTT and online video services for not only in Australia and New Zealand, but also in Asia and the US and Europe. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about monetization and some research that we did in Australia. However, it's very applicable to other regions of the world, as we've found. And going through that, we'll be talking about viewing behaviors, how we can better monetize OTT streams, and then and really just kind of talking about some of the advertising aspects and people's response to it. But first, meet Tim. So Tim woke up this morning before work very early to catch an English Premier League game, one of his favorite teams, grabbed his phone, found it on his phone, he Google casted it up to his TV on his wall in his bedroom, and proceeded to watch the match. Towards the end of the second half, Tim realized he was running late for work, so he grabbed his phone and went into the bathroom to get ready while continuing to watch the match, so he doesn't miss the last few minutes of the game. As he ate breakfast, he popped open his iPad and he started watching and catching up on all the daily news on his favorite news program. Heading off to work, Tim pulled out his iPhone and then caught up on one of his favorite programs while he's killing time on the commute. At work, at one point during the day, Tim and his coworkers started talking about Game of Thrones, and so they pulled up some clips to settle some arguments around the plot and some theories. After work, Tim went home, popped a beer, turned on the TV, and started flipping through his social media feed before finally, after dinner, sitting down with his family, turning on Apple TV, and binge watching on one of their favorite programs. So basically, what can we learn from Tim, besides the fact that Tim might be struggling with a TV addiction? We know that Tim is basically, throughout a single day, touched 6 devices in 7 locations to watch and consume content. That's very important in the research I'm going to talk about right now. It kind of supports this behavior. While Tim's stuff is probably extreme, you can probably expect to see this kind of behavior maybe on a weekly basis, maybe not on a daily basis. So we did a survey towards the end of last year in Australia, and what we wanted to do is we really wanted to figure out, we did it for 2 reasons. One was to inform and influence exactly what we wanted to build into our products for our customers. We work with primarily Tier 1 and Tier 2 TV broadcasters around the world. And the goal here was to really inform our product set, inform what features we might want to build out, but also to take this information to our customers and our clients and say, hey, this is how people are behaving. Here's some ideas we have around potentially optimizing how you're interacting with them and monetizing them. Just a real quick overview of the sample that we surveyed. We had a really good basically distribution across all demographics, across age, gender, location within Australia, and then where they are in their life cycle. Do they have kids? Have the kids left the home? Are they single, married, etc.? So what are people watching? What we found out was primarily Netflix was the biggest service that people were using. They by a resounding 69%, followed by really, if we averaged all the free-to-air services in Australia, that came in at around 47%. Other SVOD services, such as Amazon Fire and Google Play, Fetch TV, things like that, came in at around 16%. So what did the demographics of those different services look like? We found that for Netflix, the demographics primarily skewed towards younger and female. When we looked at just the Australian services, they were primarily a little bit older and male. And then for the other streaming services, we saw it was a much younger demographic that was taking up these different services. Next thing we looked at is where are they watching? So this was really interesting. I mean, some of the obvious ones are the living room, the bedroom, but then you got into some of the longer tail stuff like on public transport, at work, on the go, at parks, at dinner, etc. What was kind of interesting for us is that in the survey, people told us that they watched it on the toilet and they watched it in the bathroom. And if you add up those 2 numbers, it's actually the 3rd most popular spot to consume content in Australia. So OTT on the toilet, perhaps, I don't know. But this was, yeah, really interesting, kind of enlightening for us, and we'll talk a little bit more about why this is important. Not watching on the toilet, but why knowing where they're watching is important. Why are they streaming? So primarily it's to catch up. I mean, if you see the influx of content that's out there now, it's almost impossible to really stay on top of all the programs that you want to watch. So primarily people are flipping on the SVOD service or OTT for catch up, primarily. Second behind that is to binge watch. So, and we saw, we saw that, again, people were sitting down to binge watch, and that a lot of that was popular with females and for people under 34. And then really what surprised us was lower down the list was watching things as they go to air, as well as live programming, live sport came in around 27 and 23%. What devices are used to stream? So what was again surprising was Windows laptops, desktops was the leader in the devices that people were using to stream, followed by iPad, iPhone, and then lastly coming in fourth there was smart TVs. Lower down on the list we see that Android devices, Chromecast, MacBooks, and Apple TV was in the low teens. What we found also was that on average, people were using 2.5 devices to stream their content, which was pretty interesting. So we take a look at a little bit of the demographic around each one of those. We found that the Windows devices, the Windows laptops, desktops were primarily older, male. The iPad was really fairly well distributed across all ages and all demographics, so it's kind of a common universal uptake on iPad. Saw up to 34s on iPhone, and then the older generation, 65 plus, still like that big screen experience, and so they preferred the smart TV. And then you have the different age groups for the remainders there. Really no surprises with those. So next question we asked was what device do you prefer? What's giving you the best overall viewing experience? And predominantly the smart TV was giving the best experience for consuming on an SVOD service. The really second, third, fourth, and fifth were all very close, probably differentiated by 1%. So it was MacBook, Telstra TV, which is Roku in Australia, Apple TV, and finally Windows laptop. We next talked about, and asked them about, what are you blaming on a poor streaming quality or a poor service? 71%, which is a lot, blamed it on their broadband or their bandwidth, which was interesting because only 31% said it was the app itself and the actual streaming itself. 6% blamed it on the device. What was important about this, especially as you see 5G over the next couple of years, eliminating really that bandwidth issue and that broadband issue, service providers are really going to have to step it up and be able to deliver high quality apps, high quality streaming services, because bandwidth won't be to blame anymore. So let's talk about monetization, some advertising. So we ran through a bunch of questions around advertising. Overall, people are generally fine with it. They expect it. 22% are saying no, which, as we know, for free to air, how they make their money is on the advertising. But what we saw was, a low percentage, around 4% on the left there, was saying, I don't mind watching ads on free to air, which is expected, but they also don't mind watching ads on an SVOD service that they might be paying for. 16% were saying yes, but only on free to air, which we would kind of expect. And then some of the longer tail ones, around 5% are saying, I don't care about ads, I have ad blockers turned on, so that was interesting. They don't really mind. 6% are cool if there's ads, but a minimal amount of ads, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. When we get into targeting and making ads as relevant as possible, 2% said, I don't mind ads as long as you're giving me the ads I want to see. And then 2% were saying, I don't care either way. This was an interesting slide for us too, because there's, we asked them about the quantity of ads and the duration of the ads, and what was interesting is obviously nobody wants it. They want less ads over the period of an hour. So they wanted to see a reduction of ads. So people were saying on average, 2.6 ads per, or 2.6 ad breaks per hour is acceptable. These guys down at the bottom love ads apparently, so they're saying I want 9 to 12 ads. But what was interesting about this was people preferred longer ads over a bunch of just short ads. And so that's something that might inform and help our customers kind of decide how they're going to give ads. Are they going to really target and focus on one longer ad, or keep providing a bunch of short 15-second ads? This was an interesting one as well. So around frequency for binging. So if you think about it, basically what people were saying is that as I sit in a single binge watching session, if I'm sitting there consuming 3, 4, 5, 6 different episodes and binge watching, I would like to be rewarded for that and see less ads the longer that I'm watching TV. So again, that just kind of feeds into the whole ad strategy and understanding how long they've been watching and how you want to treat them. Targeting, so there's still a lot of work, I think, to be done for targeting. This is obviously the marketing holy grail of the right ad at the right time to the right person, but overall, people felt that they were, 29% said that, yes, I noticed I was being targeted. 22% said, no, not targeted at all. And then 18% said, yeah, I'm somewhat targeted, but probably could be better. What was interesting, though, is that 32% said they didn't notice either way, which leaves us to believe that there's still a lot of room to do effective targeting and make it more relevant to people. This question wasn't necessarily advertising based. We basically said, hey, what's some of the reasons that you think, what's your biggest complaint around streaming? And it came back, basically the two biggest ones were around advertising. So buffering in and out of the ad breaks was a major one that was driving people nuts. And then the other one was overall ad placement and how the ads were inserted. Because the two are kind of interlinked. If you got bad ad insertion or the technology is not up to snuff, there's the ability to turn off advertising or turn off the user because it's buffering too much. Ad placement also was around, where in the storyline are you sticking that ad? So, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then the rest, which were a lot less, is around image quality crashing, the actual app usability, et cetera. Why this is important is because 92% of the people we talked to were, it will influence how they consume the content. If they're going to use your service, if you have all that buffering or for bad ad insertion, it will make an impact on how much content they consume, how often they consume, what devices they're going to consume it on. So let's talk about some of the considerations. Why is all this information important for us? Really, there's a couple. The way we look at it is there's a few questions that you want to ask yourself as you're starting to get into monetization of your users, and the big one is where. So we talked a little bit about understanding where they're watching. Are they in their home? Are they watching in their living room? Are they on public transport? Are they at a park? Are they at the office, et cetera? So kind of understanding that information will help, as well as are they at home where they're kind of a captured audience, or are they on the go and they're being distracted and they only got a minimal amount of time? The when is another big question. So when, kind of in that same vein, are they going to work in the morning and they got 15 minutes to snack on some content? Obviously, you're not going to want to throw 4 or 5 pre-roll ads at them at that moment, because you should recognize that later in the evening, when they're sitting in their living room and they got the patience to watch more ads, it's probably the better time and the more effective time to serve up ads for them. Where in the program should the ad be placed? That again, this is, you typically follow that kind of formula of inserting an ad every X amount of minutes, but maybe it's not that. Maybe it's looking at the storyline itself and looking at the content, where that natural ad break might be, just not to disrupt that overall viewing experience. And then when during a binge watching session, so as we talked about, do I reduce the number of ads while my users are consuming that content? And then lastly, the big one is kind of the how. So understanding the how, right? So looking at the devices, as we saw, different devices are giving different experiences. I can guarantee you that there is probably a different ad formula and the ad strategy for people watching on an iPad versus people watching on their smart TV. So understanding, how they're interacting with that content, and being able to modify exactly when they're placing those ads for an iPad user or for an iPhone user, et cetera. It may not be the same it may not be the same effectiveness on a smart TV. How long and how many ads? We saw that people wanted less ads, but they're open to longer ads, so understanding that. How long are ad breaks? How much traffic? So this is a big one too, because you see it a lot of times at live events or a season premiere of a new show, that you have to be able to handle the traffic. So your tech stack needs to be able to control for concurrency, needs to understand how many people are going to be accessing this program. But beyond that, you also need to understand, can my ad provider give me the ads when I need them in the bulk that I need them and in the timing that I need them, especially around live events. So one thing that Switch Media has been doing in our Ad Ease product is we're working with the likes of Spot Exchange and Teleria and Google, and making sure that when we're delivering those live streams and when we need ads, that they're able to fulfill those ads in an efficient manner. And then lastly, really, is how smooth is that transition in and out of the ad break? And that's, again, it's a big disruptor. When you're watching something on a streaming service and there's a whole bunch of buffering in between almost every ad, really need to look at your technology there and how are you serving up that information. Some of the things that Switch has been working on around that is a server-side ad insertion product called Ad Ease, which basically eliminates a few of the things that we talked about today around a nice, smooth, TV-like experience in and out of the ad breaks, and really kind of, it's almost of a psychological way of giving ads. If people are used to watching it on a TV experience, and they're going into a nice, smooth ad, they might be more likely to watch that ad or not get annoyed by the ad, et cetera. With the server-side ad insertion, you're able to get around ad blocking, which again, with free-to-air broadcasters, that's how primarily they're making all their money. So it's really important to kind of regain or recover that lost revenue that we're seeing with ad blockers. Dynamic targeting. So again, working closely with ad providers, sending them through some of this targeted data so that we can provide them and stitch in more relevant ads. And then supporting across all devices. We see a new devices coming out every year, a new model every year. Being able to really seamlessly support all those different devices at any time. And that's really, I think, about it. I mean, that's, again, was a high-level overview of some of the survey research that we've done. We've got a much more detailed information. I invite you to either grab me after this or come down to our booth, which is about 2 minutes that way, right before the Cisco booth, and happy to answer any more questions, give you guys a demo, talk through it some more. But yeah, I think that's it, unless there's any questions at all. Cool, great, thank you.